All right, perfect. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Brianna Kupras. I'm going to moderate this session. I'm part of the CureGRIN board of directors. I'm also a GRIN 2A mom. This topic of behavior management and safety is so near and dear to my heart because if any of you know me, you know that Cece's biggest challenge with GRIN 2A is her behavior. Um, so for the session, we're going to hear from our wonderful speakers. We have Patty, who is a GRIA 3 mom. Hopefully, most of you know her from hosting our monthly community chats, Raising Your Superheroes. And then we have Daniel, who is a board certified behavior analyst, who is also joining us. I'm not even going to attempt your last name, Daniel. I apologize.
Okay, I understand.
Um, After our discussion, we'll open the session up to any questions that you guys have. So feel free to put anything in the chat, or you can raise your hand by using the react button at the bottom of the screen. So Patty, well, let's go ahead and I'll have you introduce yourself first.
Thanks, Bree. So, hey, everybody, I'm Patty Sanders. I'm a GRIA 3 mom. My 7-year-old son, Richie, he inherited GRIA 3 from me. I found out when we found out he was diagnosed. Just briefly, we had a incorrect diagnosis when he was about 2 years old. That diagnosis was the doctor told me that he would pass away between the ages of 3 and 8. Luckily, that wasn't our end diagnosis. And so, we were diagnosed in 2023. And CureGRIN, the connection with CureGRIN has meant so much for me over the last 3 years. And just grateful to be here with you guys today.
And then Daniel, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Daniel NoackLeSage. It's a mouthful. You can just call me Daniel. Yes, I'm a board certified behavior analyst based in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I have been in the field of behavior analysis now for 20 years. My specialization, though, is I'm not a clinical behavior analyst. I work in the public education system. I've built my career around working with teachers and school systems first, and then, of course, with parents and families and community members on the application of behavior analytic principles and concepts in the education setting. So I know those of you that might be familiar with my field are probably very familiar with it from the clinical side. My role is very much more on, again, that application in the day-to-day setting, the variable nature that is schools and the community, and applying this field in areas that aren't always under complete control. And so that's sort of what I've built my career around, and I love what I do. And I'm also married to a wonderful child psychologist based out of Baton Rouge, and we run a private clinic where we service members in the community. And we also have two wonderful daughters, a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old. And like I was telling Brianna, my wife and I have always taken the approach that everything looks great in a textbook, but whenever you come to apply it in the day-to-day, that's where the true challenges come in. And on many occasions, we have tucked our children into bed, sat down on the couch, and looked at each other and be like, wow, we really we knocked that one out the park, didn't we? Like, or that wasn't what we had planned. And so we take a very realistic approach to our professions, and we greatly enjoy the opportunity to work with families, to share with families the challenges that come with being a parent in any setting. And so I'm very thankful to have the opportunity to be here today, and I hope that I can be a resource for all of you today and in the future. If you ever need anything, or if you ever want to reach out, y'all will have my contact information, so please keep me in mind in the future as well.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you both so much for being here. Let's go ahead and get started with our first question. So it's kind of a two-part. So Patty, what are the biggest behavioral hurdles that you face daily? And then Daniel, how do we take clinical de-escalation theory and make it work in those high stress in the trenches moments?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be raw and real. Hitting, pinching, biting, kicking, throwing things at people or just throwing things in general. Um Self-injurious behavior, hitting his head against the floor, the wall, a mirror, moments that bring me to my knees, crying, watching my son go through uh, has been awful, as some of you guys do know. So it usually happens when he's dysregulated. Sometimes during transitions can be hard. And then there's those moments where he could be laughing, and then, a second later, he's just having a tantrum, a meltdown. He could just come up to me out of nowhere, pull my hair, etc. We deal with a lot of behavioral issues. That's what I hate most about this diagnosis. It's definitely our biggest hurdle. However, through ABA, he's been in ABA since he's about 2 years old or two and a half. And he goes to a school-based program now that's ABA. Techniques have helped significantly, but there's still very, very hard moments throughout some days and very hard days that turn into weeks sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something a lot of us have dealt with. So, Daniel, when you're in that moment, because they happen and they happen quickly, what can
Yes.
you do?
I think part of, you know, gosh, there's so many different ways to answer this question. You know, when you look at taking any approach, but especially a behavioral approach, we tend to divide things up into three phases. Okay, three phases of the approach, and in ABA they call it the ABC model, the antecedent behavior consequence model. But you expand that out into what is your tool belt and what do you have to bring to the table. And so when I walk into a classroom and I sit down with a family and you're asked these questions. What do I do? What's the number one recommendation? What is the best approach? And what I have found is you can look all day long at saying, okay, what is the best approach for this behavior, or what is the best approach for that child? Because that's our focus. That is where our concern lies. But when I develop a behavior plan, or even amongst my wife and I with raising our two children, I find that we lean way more on what are our abilities, where are we coming from, what tools, what am I bringing to the table, and how can I build from there, you know? And so if you take that idea that, like, you're not trying to adapt yourself to the best practice, you're trying to adapt best practice to you and what you currently have. And I think that's where we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. A lot of, I know being a parent, and um, if my child acts out when we're out in public, it's easy for me as a professional to say, oh, don't be embarrassed by that. That's just what children do. But I mean, we all know that that doesn't mean anything whenever you're in the moment. And so um, what I have found, instead of worrying about what is the best, I have to figure out what's the best for me. What do I bring? And so that's especially relevant when it comes to de-escalation, because a lot of times the person, the child, or the actor in the situation, once we have them de-escalated, we we're done. Like they are now de-escalated. But it's like hitting a tuning fork. You have that initial sound, And yes, that initial tune goes away, but you can still hear, you can still perceive. And I think that's where we as parents, that if we don't get that resident noise away, that's what builds into the next time. That's what makes us not as effective the next time, is because, like you just said, you never know. Is this going to be one incident, or is this now going to be the rest of my day? And is this going to be just one day, or is this going to be the rest of my week? And I think part of that is, for me as a parent, has been realizing that I have some say in that. I have not necessarily some say, but I have some influence in that. And so I've had to work a lot as a parent of not just de-escalating my children afterwards, but also de-escalating myself. And so, and that's what, the theory of de-escalation is working through these moments, but then it takes a lot of practice to work through this residual effect. And I find for myself, I can't focus on how is this other parent doing? How are they appear to be making it through. They appear to be doing the right thing, but I'm not. You know what I'm saying? And I'm sure we've all felt this way, And so when I look at what needs to be done in my home for de-escalation, I break it up into these three areas. Okay. And it's a cycle. It's okay. Here is what I'm going to do to get ahead of the behavior. Okay, what are the patterns that I'm noticing in my home? What are the settings? What are the triggers? Okay, and we can do our best to get ahead, and we can do our best to set up the best antecedent-based interventions, but the behavior is still going to happen. And behavior is, there's no cure, there's no fix for behavior. All you're doing is you're trying your best to create an environment that will reduce the likelihood of concerning behaviors and increase the likelihood of appropriate behaviors. And you're just trying to influence future behaviors. And then, so when those behaviors do occur, how are we working with our children through that? Okay. And so those are your teaching phases of behaviors. And then once you've worked through the behavior, what is moving into the consequence phase? Now, everybody here today, I hope, understands that, as we all know, I mean, consequences, and first off, by the way, consequences, whenever you speak consequence in common vernacular, what does everybody think about? Everybody's brain is automatically going to punishment. Okay, but that is not at all what consequences truly are. Consequences are both. They are both punishing things, they are reinforcing things, and then there are neutral consequences that can be just as effective as either one. Okay, so you have to decide what is the approach that you need to take for your child, or for yourself, or for your family. But you work through each one of these phases in preparation for next time. Okay, and as we could talk about different examples all day long, but going back to your example, or your question being, it's an overall mindset that we have to take. We have to break it down into, I break it down into one of these three phases, and I tell myself, okay, there are things that I know I can improve in every single one of these areas, but there is no way I can improve all these areas all the time. So here's what I'm going to focus on for the next week, and I'm going to get better in this area. And then what I have found over time is that has helped me be a better person for my child, so that when these incidences do happen, I feel more confident. I feel better. I don't hold this residual. For me personally, my biggest flaw as a parent is the guilt that I have after I make certain mistakes. And I'm sure we all feel it. And so I have personally worked on preparing myself for the future behavior that my children are going to do so that I can feel better in the moment, even if I do make a mistake. And that helps. What I have found is that by tackling what I need to be better, it makes the de-escalation moments with my children and the de-escalation moments for myself or the de-escalation moments for our house better so that we can move past these things. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but this is just, I have all these, that's a tough thing for all parents to tackle. And I would imagine for those of y'all in this room, that is something that you probably carry with you a lot,
100%. I'm just gonna jump in. So I've learned so much through the therapy that my son's gone through or going through, just how to help him. Um, and it's like when things were really bad, a few years ago, I remember screaming to God, like, please help him. And now I find myself when we're in those hard moments, I ask God to help me because my son, he feeds off like how I am, and he knows when I'm stressed, he senses that I'm off, and we're all human. We have stresses, and I'm not my best self every day. But what I find is that the calmer I am in situations and keep him on a strict routine, the better success we have
know?
with behaviors at home. Um,
I agree, and there's so many different ways you can apply what I'm about to say, but my wife and I, we call it setting our baseline. What is our baseline? And this goes for everything that we discuss as parents. Our 10-year-old is starting to add, first off, we don't have a lot of electronics in our house. All right. And so that goes back to before my wife and I had children of just our personality types. But I have a 10-year-old and she started to ask and she's starting to be curious. And so we bring that into that conversation of, okay, what is our baseline? What is our, we worry about the influence that electronics has on children, or you can apply that to, the guilt that we feel when we quote unquote aren't fail as a parent, or when we're not bringing our best. But if our baseline interaction with our children is, for the most part, good parenting, then we have to give ourselves grace. We have to allow ourselves to not be perfect. And I'm speaking from a personal message that I have to tell myself almost every single day, that it is okay to make a mistake. It is okay for every moment not to be perfection and not to be memory making, with our children, because our children, they feed off of who we are, not the mistakes that we make every now and then.
Mhm. All right, awesome. So what do you guys think are the most effective ways to modify your home environment so that you can hopefully prevent triggers and also ensure physical safety for everyone involved in, these meltdowns that happen?
so modify our home environment. So honestly, a lot of the modifications happen because something unsafe happened. Um, The one I'm most happy about is the projector. We had many broken TVs. Richie's from a young baby. He'd like to throw things. And so when he's dysregulated or upset, he will throw something at the TV if he has it. So the projector was a huge success in our house because now we can't break it. Um, the other thing is, my house, it doesn't look like, a gorgeous, pretty house. It looks like a house set up for my son. I have gym mats, the mats like with the 4 panels. I have them on 2 rooms on portions of the floor and on the wall. One is the family room. That's where he plays a lot, and he used to bang his head on the floor and on the wall. So that's why the mats are there, as well as in his room around his bed, which is also his safe space for when I need like 5 minutes by myself. We've also changed door locks, turned the door locks around so you get a key to enter the door because of scary situations that have happened in the bathroom. And I just don't want him going into rooms that he doesn't need to go into. I have chain locks like you would in a hotel up at the top so he can't get out, because if he could get out, he would. And, you know, I can't let that happen. So I have chain locks on all our doors. Um, oven locks, tried fridge door locks, the pantry door is locked, just because of things that have happened. Because he doesn't know any better. He'll just go, and he doesn't know any better. Um, I will say, I know this doesn't have to do with the environment, but one of the tools that we have learned, timers work so well for Richie. Using timers have significantly helped transitions. We use timers for everything. We're playing this game for 10 minutes, we'll set a timer. We're going to shower in 10 minutes, we'll set a timer. We're going to go to bed in 20 minutes, we'll set timers all day long. It helps. It has helped him tremendously. Um, Other things for the house, things have gotten broken, furniture, tables, lamps, mirrors. And so less is better in our house. So there's not too much on the walls or on any tables, for the chance that he might throw it, um, because he has. Um, So yeah, it's like our house looks kind of crazy, but it is all for Richie, and to help prevent any sort of unsafe thing happening to any of us while we're here. We are actually going to remodel the bathroom, the shower as well, because there's been a few scary incidents in the shower that have happened as well. So yeah, we're learning as we go. The other thing is in the car. I'll just mention the car. Um, Richie, he likes to throw things, as you know. And so sometimes he'll take off his shoes and his braces and he'll throw them at me. And one time he threw it and the gear shifts slipped into neutral. Actually, that's a lie. It happened twice. So now if he wants to take off his shoes when we get in the car, we take off the shoes. You know, uh, I let him take them off because it's better him taking them off and me putting them back on than him throwing them while we're in the car ride. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey, scary for sure. A lot of miracle moments. I'm not sure how he didn't get hurt, that have happened. So yeah, I don't
So
know.
I have to tell you something. You have given me $1 million idea that I'm going to share with all my parents. I have, as 20 years, I've heard so many parents about broken televisions. I have never, ever in my years thought to tell a parent, have you thought about projection screens? I think that's a wonderful idea. I think that's very smart. And so, sorry. Anyway, when I heard that, I was like, oh, wow, that's a great idea. I have to share.
Mhm, mhm,
I think that the fact that you have embraced the idea of modifying your home. My wife and I talk about this all the time because we have very different personalities. I'm wonderful at organizing and keeping our house running. I can tell you, I could open up my fridge right now and tell you when the next trip to Costco has to be. My wife is phenomenal at making it a home, and our home is not for anybody else. Our home is for us. Our home is for me, it's for her, and it is for our 2 children. And whatever we have to do to get from day to day, who cares what other people think? Because they don't have to live in it. And a lot of people will respect us for the home that we build for our families. And I love the fact that it sounds like you have embraced that we are modifying, we are making this what we need for every day. And you're right. I mean, safety has to come first. We can talk all day long, and it's something I share with my administrators when we talk about supplies that a classroom needs. 9 out of 10 supplies that I recommend have nothing to do with teaching. It has everything to do with safety. Let's make sure that our children are safe, because something as simple as, I have a young man who hates to have his fingernails clipped. Okay, he doesn't like it, and we are working with him on all these skills, but he impulsively sometimes reaches out and grabs and scratches, and he will leave some deep gashes on people. And it's so easy to say, well, he's unsafe. Well, yeah, yes, but how can we make him access his environment in a safe manner? And so we got permission from the parents to send him to school every day in baseball batter's gloves. Okay, and it looks different, but you know what? It keeps him safe, and he can access his learning environment. But until we were able to take away the instinctive fear that we feel as the actors in this young man's environment, and take the blame off of him and put it upon, okay, what are realistic ways that we can work through this? We weren't going to go, we were just going to go round and round. And next thing you know, we weren't providing any service to this child. And so, yes, first and foremost, safety always has to come first. Proofing everything, making modifications, doors, everything, and do it from the standpoint of not only, like you mentioned, a lot of things about what can I do so that I don't have to worry about him when I can't see him. Yes, that is and there's multitude of ways you could bring that whole discussion back to our previous question. That offers you peace so that you can then live your life and be better for him whenever he needs you. Okay. And so, yes, some of those things, I'm sure if you've shared your ideas with other people, they might have looked at you kind of funny, like, wait, you put top locks on your doors? Yes, but it is what we need to make sure that my child is safe, so that I can be a better parent for him and keep him safe. And so there's different phases of safety. There's, what do we do when no one else is around? And then what does he need in the moment? What do I need? I carry gloves in my bag at all times, because I never know when I need to protect my hands to work with a child. And so you have your tools that you can use in the moment. And it sounds like you've modified multiple areas of your house, because those are the most valuable things. And then you move into, what are your tools? And yes, timers, visuals, and here's one thing I recommend for parents, because I hear this a lot from adults. Well, why do you need a timer? Why does he need a to-do list? That's not how the world works. Bull. That is exactly how the world works. Look at every app you have on your phone. Look at every tool that you use. Step into your car. I mean, what are blinkers? What's the beep, beep, beep whenever you don't put your seatbelt on? We utilize tools all the time for adults, but for some reason, we don't think it's appropriate to use tools for children, because they're going to have to learn how the real world works. Well, let's take a look at how the real world works and apply it to our children. So don't shy away from visuals, from timers, because, like, going back to something you also said, Patricia, you guys run a tight ship on a tight schedule, and you couldn't do it without these timers and these visuals. And so setting up your environment, and just start with the basics. Visuals and timers, those are we utilize, not just you, we utilize those things too every single day. My 10-year-old still, when I look at her in the morning and I say, did you get your morning routine done? 3 out of 5 mornings, she'll sit there and she'll turn around and go look at the chart that we made for her when she was 4 years old. It's the same chart, and we have had it every single day sitting right outside their bedroom. And her 6-year-old sister has learned to utilize the exact same chart. And so, yeah, no, those are going to be your safety, visual tools, and auditory tools are going to be your three biggest things that you can use in a house: timers and visuals.
Yeah, and I think that getting past that preconceived notion of what like a normal household is
Yep.
supposed to run like, I think that's like a big hurdle for our families when they first get into figuring out what works best, because it
Absolutely.
does go against the norm so much. So, I mean, you guys have some really amazing ideas, which I think is, and you can see in the chat, like, oh my gosh, yeah, projector, never thought of that.
Yeah, and here's one thing I encourage parents to do. Sorry, I've put a lot. My wife and I this stuff a lot because we work with so many different families. Go read the history of homes in the U.S. Go read, why do we have certain areas of our home? Why do we have certain architecture? And what I've always been, and I think my wife and I have these conversations a lot because my wife is actually from Germany. And so she grew up in a completely different culture, a completely different way of doing things. And so oftentimes we will have talks about how we were raised and different things. And one thing I have found is that the modern way of doing things, or the way things have always been done, only goes back 1 or 2 generations. It's only within our current memory. And so once you start to look at that, and once you start to recognize that this is not necessarily the way it's always been done, that brings up the why question. Then why do I need to do it? Why do I need to set my household up for some other person's standard when they don't have to live here? And so that's what's always helped me when I look around at our home and the way we do things, being different from other people that we know. And if that helps you guys, I would highly recommend. I've gone down many rabbit holes on Wikipedia as to why we do certain things that we do.
Really good advice. Okay, so when a crisis is happening, and this is for both of you definitely, but I think more so for Daniel, like, what are some go-to strategies that we can use as caregivers for staying regulated and trying to keep the situation from escalating? So I know for myself, it has taken years, but I am able to stay calm when things are happening. So I lower my voice, I make sure I breathe deep. So I'm not having like that gut reaction to things. And it has been a very big work in progress for me. So what are some tools do you think that we could use? And then Patty, what are some tools that you do use currently?
You want to go first, Patty, or would you like me to go first?
I'll quickly go. So same, Bree, exactly how you said it. The calmer I am, the better, and the shorter the episode will last. So Richie, he's non-speaking. He has a few approximations of words. He uses some sign language, and he uses an AAC device. And when he is escalated, uh, there's no using the AAC. I've tried, and he'll throw it or put it out of the room. So I've learned that less talking is better and staying calm. And sometimes it's that he needs deep pressure, and sometimes it's that he needs space. And yeah, I think that's it.
I'm going to preface this with everything that I'm about to say. I have gotten it wrong so many times. It is so hard to do these things in the moment, and it takes practice. So what I'm going to speak on is what my ideals that I try to emulate every single time, and if I can get 60% of it correct, then that's better than I would have done before. That's another thing, is that I find we oftentimes approach situations in the idea of, I need to get it all right, or I'm just going to panic. No, we get what we can get right, and we are proud of that, and we grow from that for next time. And so with that being said, I want you to imagine that you put yourself in a situation, not a situation you've had with your child, but a situation you've had in your life where it could be something as simple as you've made a mistake, you dropped something, you spilt your coffee, you did something minute, okay? Or it could be something big, a huge mistake you made at work, or a huge embarrassing event, or tripped and fell in public. You know, think of something in this situation. And then I want you to imagine, as soon as you did that, rock and roll, heavy metal, the most disturbing noise that you can think of started playing on a volume of 11. Okay. You were inundated with noise. And then on top of that, somebody that you consider to be an authority figure. This could be somebody that you trust. It could be somebody that you love. It could be somebody that you resent. It doesn't matter who this person is. So not only are you having these feelings of making a mistake, and then all of a sudden the environment is chaos. You know, throw in lights, throw in whatever gets your nerves. The lights are flickering all of a sudden. And then all of a sudden this person is coming to you and telling you what you should be doing, what you should have done, or why did you do that? Or they want you to explain yourself, or they want to suddenly turn this into a teachable moment for you in that moment. What is your gut reaction, even as I'm telling you this? If your anxiety is not through the roof right now, I'd be very surprised. Or you're going to turn to that person and you're going to physically act out in front of them. You know, another good example of this is a vending machine. You know, if you go up to a vending machine and you put your money in and you press the button and you watch your peanut M&Ms get stuck, what do you do as a typical neurotypical perfectly developed adult? What is your reaction going to be in this moment? It's a heightened state of emotion. You're going to be shaking that machine, you're going to be cussing, you're going to be doing whatever you can do to get what you want. And then all of a sudden somebody comes up to you and they tell you, didn't you notice it was out of order? Or didn't you notice that you should have pressed this button instead? Here, let me show you. Let me teach you what to do next time. Okay. You're going to turn and you're going to aggress towards them. Okay. So in that, when you think about these moments and what you should do for your child in these moments, start with, what do you need to get through this? You need silence. You need peace. You need a moment to process what is going on in that. Okay, so then take what you need in these moments and apply that now to yourself with your child. How can you bring that into these moments with your child? And so for me, what that has turned into is when my child is doing something that they shouldn't be doing, before I speak, before any words come out of my mouth, I have tried my best to train myself to count to somewhere between 5 and 10. Okay, I count very slowly in my head. And what I'm doing in that moment while I'm counting is I'm looking, I'm observing, I'm hearing, I'm taking in everything that my child is giving to me in that moment so that I can work with them better. Okay, because I have found that if I rush in there, and even if I'm not trying to teach them, but I'm trying to fix it, if I'm trying to rush in and give all this attention to it, all I really do is make it worse. Now, I know in you guys' case, and also many cases that I've had at work, or even with my own children, if what they're doing is unsafe, there's no way I can just sit back and let this happen. But just because I have to physically get involved, just because I have to cover the back of their head because a child is headbanging, or if a child is scratching themselves, yes, I'm not going to count to 10. But just because I physically have to intervene doesn't mean that I have to verbally and emotionally intervene in that moment. And that is something that I practice every single day at home and at work, is recognizing to give the situation a moment before I try to work to work through it. Okay. And what that has done for me is it has allowed me to use the tools in my toolbox better. Okay. How do I calm my child? If my child just needs a hug, if my child just needs a shh, if my child just needs whatever that they need in that moment, by me taking a breath going into it, I am much better on the tail end. And then that brings us back to our first question. I feel better about what I did. I feel better in how I help my child de-escalate, and I'm a better person for it in the future. So I think that's my number one piece of advice that I give to anybody that I talk to, is that there is a world of difference between physically intervening and verbally and emotionally intervening. And so I might have to physically be there at second number one, but I always try to hold those other two things for as long as I possibly can. And then another thing to recognize that I have found helps is, even once you're like, if you put yourself back into the shoes of your child, even once you have worked through a situation that has brought you stress, you still don't want to talk about it right away. And we oftentimes feel as parents that we have to always be teaching our children. We always have to leave them with a message that they can then grow into next time. And sometimes the best message is that mom or dad were here for me when I needed them, and they're here for me when we're back on track 5 minutes from now. They don't need to learn what to do next time. They don't need to learn what they did wrong and how they could have done better. So I have worked really hard to parse those situations out with each one of my children. And if I feel that it is a topic that needs to be discussed, I will bring it up later. It might be the next day. It might be 10 minutes from now. It might be an hour from now. It might even be the next week. But I find a time when I feel it is better to teach than to point out the mistakes that they made. And I think that's also something that can help work through those moments.
Yeah, having that initial like, stop, what are you doing? It's hard to break that.
Yes. One second, somebody just brought something up in the chat that I think, yes, I agree, Melissa. The idea of bringing it to our children. Now, I understand some of our children are nonverbal. And so by asking them what they need, they might not be able to give us a response unless they can access AAC devices or unless they have a communication device. But even, again, the idea of what you're bringing to the table, Melissa, is focusing in on where is the child and what do they need. And if my child is showing me through her voice or through her actions that all she needs is a hug, then that's all I'm going to do. That's it. And no matter how much I want to teach her, that is what I'm teaching her. I'm teaching her that dad is here. Like, I had that conversation with my 10-year-old yesterday, because she's 10 and she's starting to have some emotions that she's processing through. And she goes, Daddy, I just needed somebody to cry with. And I said, okay, great. Daddy's got a belly right here, my belly. If you ever need a belly to cry on, that's all you need to do. And she's like, okay. And she laughed and she went on. And I think that was a good reminder that we are here for them no matter what they need.
Mm-hmm. And question 4 kind of just talks about the same things that we have been discussing. So the balance between long-term goals of teaching skills and the immediate need for daily survival, which it's a fine balance. And I think figuring out what you need yourself to make yourself better, to be better in those situations, is definitely some really good advice. I can say for our family, I try to be as silly as possible when we can, instead of taking everything very seriously and we don't do these things or whatever. So my daughter has a lot of self-injurious behavior. It is definitely our biggest struggle with Grin 2A. So sometimes I ignore the behavior and I'll just say, "Oh, I think we have so many tears. We just have to get them out." And so we do a bucket and I'll just hold my hands out so she can just into my hands and then we throw it away. Like, "Oh, do we still have more?" And we do it again. And eventually she just kind of laughs or she'll be like, and then we're done and we can then address the behavior. So I don't know if anyone's used that, but that's one that I use when it keeps happening. So there's something that I am not catching on to. I'm not catching the trigger. I'm not, the behavior is still there consistently for minutes or longer. And so that's kind of like my last tool that I use, like, let's pull something silly because clearly we're not getting out of this on our own. um, so do you have any tools like that where you can kind of throw it in immediately, but maybe it's something that sticks later on?
I think that when, again, it goes back to the severity of a behavior and a combination of that idea that, like, the only thing that makes, like, if what you're truly worried about, I think sometimes, or what we are truly worried about whenever it comes to our children is them continuing to do this behavior in the future and developing this as a behavior that they will carry with them for the rest of their life. And that goes for both appropriate and inappropriate behaviors. And we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to, okay, I got to get this behavior to stop and I got to turn this into a teachable. All right. And one thing that I stress, which is ironic considering what I do for a profession, is that not everything has to be a teachable moment. Not everything has to be skill building. Okay. Sometimes it is okay that you just got the behavior to stop. Okay. Now, you don't want to turn your daughter into the situation where she's doing this behavior so that you will give her the attention that she's looking for and therefore now she's engaging in this behavior. But I think what you're not, that's not a concern that you're having in this situation. You're trying to get the behavior to stop so that you can move on with her and continue to have happy moments. You're not just bringing out these happy moments whenever she's having this. So I think when moments escalate, if as long as you don't give the child what it is they want for that behavior, that's a win. Like if she was engaging in this behavior so that she could then have her favorites, I'm just grabbing basic ABA 101. Is she doing this behavior so that she'll get her favorite food item or her favorite toy? Okay, that's not the scenario that you just described. You described your child who's going through a moment of crisis and you pull out the silliness to get it to stop. You didn't reward you, so inherently you did not reward her for that behavior. You did something fun, but doesn't necessarily mean it was rewarding. And so in these moments, as long as you're not rewarding the behavior, my belief is do whatever you have to do to get the behavior to stop. Get your child back to safe, and then you can build from there. But if you start to recognize that, hey, she's doing this more and more so that she'll get this reaction out of me, then that's a whole other discussion. But I think that's something that I often, you see that, bringing it back to your original question about de-escalation in the school setting. A child might be doing something that is inappropriate for the school setting. And so people that aren't trained and aren't recognizing it, they freak out instead of focusing on whatever that child needs to get through the behavior. And so that, as a parent, that's what I would recommend, is do whatever you have to do to get the behavior to stop and then reevaluate your approach for tomorrow, because one thing we've talked about for the last hour is it's going to happen again. And so how can we be better next time? And no, I'm all for that. Keep our children safe first, build the skill tomorrow. Yeah, it's hard. It's a hard thing because we all worry about that. I mean, I worry about that every single time my children make a mistake. Is what do I need to do to teach them better? Well, sometimes I just need to show them that I still love them, you know?
All right, and we have like 8 minutes left. So I did want to ask a question. Jackie, another mom, brought it up in the chat, and it was definitely on my list. How do we manage the safety and emotional well-being of siblings who are around this behavior? Because it is very hard when they feel like they're not the one getting the attention. They're always in the background. This is always happening on top of the actual incident that's happening. You know what I mean? The same stress that you're going through and the child's going through and everything.
I've spent a lot of time thinking about this question because you emailed that to me, and I've done a lot of reflecting with my own children, and because they're at two different stages of development, and how do I make sure that I'm giving each one of them time? And you can't control the amount of time that your child needs, your child with special needs is going to need. They're going to take that time from you, okay? And so naturally we feel guilt when we think about the siblings, okay? Have to stop that because we cannot control that. We cannot control the guilt that we might feel, because if we stop worrying about the guilt, now we have energy and time to focus on what does the sibling need from me. And what does the sibling need? They just want time. Oh, my internet connection is unstable. So if anything happens, just let me know. I apologize. They just want our time, and they want our focus, okay? And they want our focus on them as individuals. They don't want to hear us apologizing. They don't want to hear us saying, I'm so sorry that I wasn't able to spend as much time with you today because Alex needed me through these moments. They know the reason we weren't there. And then what are we doing in that moment when we're spending time? I'm going to say Alex and Jordan, my two daughters. When I'm spending time with Jordan, if I'm apologizing for my behavior based on what Alex needs, I'm still focusing on Alex while I'm with Jordan. I'm not giving Jordan truly the time that she needs. And children are way more mature and way more cognizant of reality than we give them credit for. We don't need to apologize to them and try to make it up. What they want from us is just our time and just our focus. And I have found with a lot of parents that I've worked with through this sibling question is the best way to make it up is to just have them near you later, and if that makes what I'm trying to say is just sitting with that child while they're doing their homework, or having that child come with you now to prepare dinner, or having that child reading a story to that child is really all that they need. They just need the reminder that we are there for them to again, lay that baseline for them. Now, that will also give you the opportunity to see the sibling and check with the sibling for if they do need more than that. Maybe they do need to talk to an outside professional. Maybe they do need to talk to a counselor or a trusted community member to get some of these thoughts and emotions out. But what they need from us primarily as their parent to quote unquote make up for it is just our time, just And I have found on the days when I'm giving too much attention, or too much, when I'm giving way more attention to one child than the other, 5 minutes of my undivided attention is what my second child needed that day. Because again, I'm not going to make up for it in a day. But if I can do this, make this my new standard and my new way of approaching the sibling across the next week, the next month, I'm building, I'm creating that reassurance for them as well. So that's always my recommendation, is make it about that child and not about the family dynamic.
Okay. And how would you handle not just like the time and obviously our guilt and everything, but the kids' actual emotions of like anger or resentment or the things that they're seeing where their special needs sibling may be treated completely differently from them as far as consequences and things like that
Yeah.
go, but also just the trauma of seeing your brother or sister hurting themselves or hurting other people, or how do you handle that?
First and foremost, validate all of it, because I think that children, especially, they haven't learned yet what is an appropriate emotion and what is not. All they know is that they're having feelings, that they are, I feel this way, but then I know I shouldn't feel this way because it's my sibling and I love them. And children aren't jaded by the same things that we are jaded with as an adult. So their guilt is almost a little bit more innocent in what I have found. And so just validate it. Say, yes, you have every right to be angry. You have every right to feel this way. You have every right to be upset. There is absolutely nothing wrong with being upset. And I think giving children permission to have the feelings that they have. I mean, there's a lot of adults that I know that could use some permission in having the feelings that we have. It will create better relationships between them and their siblings, between you and them, because they just want to be accepted for who they are and not who they are in relation to their sibling. If we try to say, well, you really shouldn't feel that way. Why? Why shouldn't they feel that way? They do. And we feel that way too, and so first and foremost, validate it. And then again, if if you if you need someone else to guide you and work with you through that, um, look for professionals in your community who can give you more advice. But as a parent, first and foremost, just um, if you we love all of our children for who they are, no matter what, and that involves validating how they feel.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing your input, and Patty for bringing us into your life, because I know how hard it is. If any of you guys have questions for Patty or Daniel, feel free to contact them about that. We are out of time right now. Is there anything that you guys want to say before we end the session? Because we do have a 5-minute break until the next keynote.
I'm
I'll
sorry.
just say one. Oh,
You go.
I was gonna say one thing that has really helped us is finding what works for Richie and taking advantage of it. For instance, he really likes me wearing my hair down. So if I have like a task, like I need to give a medicine, I intentionally put my hair up. So he asks for it to come down, and I say, first, take your medicine, then my hair will come down. That has helped us out so much. So I'll leave you with that.
Um, make sure that you're taking care of yourselves too. That's all I can say, is because I'm only effective as a parent who's also a behavior analyst if I take care of Daniel first.
Mhm.
And there's no guilt in that. Because why? Because think about why you're doing it. You're doing it so that you can be a better parent. You're not doing it just to take care of yourself. But I think when we forget about ourselves, it leads to it perpetuates the cycle, in lack of a better way to put it. So,
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. I could talk to you for hours, but I know we have another session. So if any of you are joining the next session, please feel free to go back to the agenda and there should be that link open. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
thank you.
Thank you.